Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the latest installment of the Senturus Knowledge Series. Today, we'll be discussing Cognos data module architectures and use cases. Our agenda today, after some quick introductions, we'll get into the heart of the presentation covering Cognos data module architectures, talk about data set libraries, cover some specific use cases, and then again, stick around for a informative but brief Senturus overview and free additional resources to get to the Q&A at the end. So joining me today is Mr. Pedro Inning. Pedro joined Senturus back in 2010 and has over 20 data warehousing experience that he brings to this role. He's a veteran data architect, developing his skills as the BI industry evolved through multiple iterations of BI platforms, including Cognos, MicroStrategy, and Tableau. My name is Mike Weinhauer. I'm a director here at Senturus. I've been designing, selling, and delivering BI solutions for, I'll just say, excess of 25 years. And among my many roles at Senturus, one of them is hosting our webinar knowledge series. As usual, before we go, just before we get into the heart of the presentation, we'd like to get our finger on the pulse of our clients and the attendees of the webinar. So to that end, I'm going to launch our poll. Today's question is, which version of Cognos are you using? And select one of those. Are you au courant with 11.1 R7? Are you somewhere in between with a version somewhere between 11.0 and 11.1 R6? Or are you on version 10 or earlier? And the rationale for that is that data modules didn't exist in version 10 or earlier, so that would kind of tell us, your relative level of sophistication with it. 11.0 and 11.1 R6 is when they were kind of newer technology. And in their current iteration, they have all the latest and greatest functionality. So it looks like the preponderance of you, closing in on 2/3, are somewhere in the middle. Good chunk of y'all are on the latest and greatest, though. And then we got a small percentage on 10 or earlier. So interesting. I would have thought there were more on 10, but probably good to see that that's the case. Thanks for sharing the information with us. It's always interesting to see what our audience is doing. And with that, I'm going to hand the floor over to Pedro. Pedro, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, everybody. So Cognos data modules, architectures and use cases. Before we get into that, let's just kind of ground ourselves. We got a couple of webinars already out there that kind of really focus on Cognos data modules versus Framework Manager and self-service. We're going to talk about architectures today, but let's ground ourselves a little bit for those people who may be coming in cold, what data modules are. So Cognos data modules came out with 11.0. It's really a web-based and user-focused data blending, modeling, transformation tool in a debut with Cognos 11.0, allowing end users to be able to do their own modeling within the Cognos tool set without having to use Framework Manager. It's really IBM's response to this term of data democratization. Other tools like Tableau and Microsoft Power BI now allow end users to do their own modeling, bring in their own spreadsheets, point to a variety of different data sources. And generally in the 10.0 series and below, IBM was more of an IT-centric type of product, where IT would have to do the modeling for you, create the FM model, and publish the package. And there's very little that end users can do to enhance that model or actually do their own. So with new tools like Tableau and Power BI, some of the first things that those tools want you to do is point to a data source and do the modeling yourself. And it allows you to get a lot of power out of end user self-service modeling techniques. So I believe, in my opinion, 11.0 and now through 11.1 release 7, this is really IBM coming up to par with some of these other tools that are out there in the BI industry right now. The release 7, 11.1 is the latest release coming out. That is out. It came out actually last summer. 11.2 is supposedly going to be coming out in maybe the end of March, April time frame. But the release 7 definitely significantly closed some of the technical gaps between Framework Manager and data modules, and I think you're going to see a lot of a continued enhancement in this particular tool set within the Cognos Analytics series. And another point here: all future development resources are going to be focused on data module specific enhancements. The framework manager tool that was used prior for most modeling activities will be supported. It probably will never be ever deprecated to a point where they will take it out of the product. But a lot of the new enhancements are going to be done in data modules themselves. So before I move on to the architectures, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are asking, what are data modules still missing? There's probably a lot of IT folks out there who are using FM. I'm going to get this out of the way real quickly here before we get into the higher level topic, just to tell you what's not there right now. For those of you who are using Framework Manager to do dimensionally modeled relational, and I think that maybe there's a lot of people still using it, but I think that particular niche of FM modeling is going down in use. The DMR, the dimensionally modeled relational piece, is not supported in data modules right now. One other aspect, object-based security, basically allowing you to secure parts of the model like tables and things like that, and fields based on security, is not currently supported. Team-based modeling is not supported, but from my opinion, we haven't used that a lot, and it is more of a user-based modeling tool. But if you're asking that question, can you do the branches and the merge of team-based modeling that's in FM? That's currently not there. And parameter maps, there's some advanced FM modeling that's done with multilingual packages and maybe very complex row-level security implementations in parameter maps. That's not there. We're hoping to see some of this get picked up in newer releases. We did a whole webinar on FM versus data modules. It's out there on the Senturus website. We did talk about how you can somewhat simulate the FM style namespaces and packages. I would encourage you to go out there and take a look at that as well. The last one here is interesting because we actually found this out on one of our projects where we were trying to implement data modules. The search and select prompt for reporting, there you can see it on the right. It's used quite a bit when you're creating a static report and trying to do some prompting with a search and select. For some reason, that's currently not supported if it is a data module source. So if you have very strict report implementations that maybe need that, you might have to think of another type of prompting scenario that you might want to use. So we found that out a couple months ago, which was kind of interesting as we started using these things. So just some things to think about. I kind of outlined them here. These are some of them. And of course, there's always that whole FM versus data modules. How would you do this in data modules, et cetera? I would encourage you to take a look at the other webinar for that. But for this webinar, what we want to talk about are some potential data module architectures. I think a lot of the evolution of data modules is how do we use it? What does it do? It's a very new kind of concept. And how does it compare to FM? What are the features? All the different features of data modules are very specific technically. But what we would like to really kind of talk about today is maybe some potential key architectures that you can use to implement data modules. And as we've kind of worked through the marketplace, worked through some of our clients, looked through some of our use cases, we've kind of come up with maybe it's basically kind of like 3 categories of where you might use these type of architectures. There's the IT, we're calling it the IT-driven enterprise model. We'll talk through this, the hybrid model, and really a pure end user-driven model. Because Cognos basically has a lot of legacy, right? It's been around since the 90s. It's gone through Cognos ReportNet, Cognos 8, Cognos 10, framework model, different architectures that have been implemented. And now we have this new data module architecture, but we have a lot of legacy out there. And a lot of folks have a lot of FM packages and things like that that are still out there. So as we drive through that, let's talk about the classic FM model first, just a baseline. Generally, IT will gather the report requirements from the end users. They'll develop the framework manager model there in a silo. Sometimes they'll go away for a couple months. They'll create the model based on some of these user requirements. Then it publishes the package from the framework model, and it creates standard reports from the package. And then, of course, users can create their own ad hoc analysis and reports from the package. But that whole layer of Cognos package and framework manager model development is typically hidden from the users, and it's kind of a black box, okay? So what we're trying to get to is we can still use that model in a sense with data modules. I think there's still a lot of value in having this kind of model apply in a data module framework. So yes, we can replace the use of FM with data modules because we all try to wrestle with that subject. Well, should I replace my FM models with data modules? But we want to kind of parameterize it a little bit more. So for new modeling projects against new data sources, yes, we can use data modules in that respect, but they're driven more by business requirements versus, say, modeling the entire database, the entire ERP, creating one massive FM model or creating one massive data module against that source, okay? So they're meant to be kind of done in maybe more small subject area bites, right? If we use that concept. So for existing legacy FM models, the question comes, well, should I reverse engineer my entire FM model to data modules? And generally, I think the answer is basically no. I think what you have a lot of FM models out there. They're working fine for you. They got hundreds of reports against them, but there could be areas, subject areas in those FM models that really need to be redesigned because a lot of these FM models have been around for 10 to 15 years. They've grown. There are namespaces in there which the current developers have no understanding of why they are the way they are. And users use these things maybe from a self-service perspective and get very lost in what they are. So if you look at it from the perspective, you could select business relevant subject areas in that FM model that could be redesigned for better self-service. You could take that approach. And I would recommend taking that approach versus doing a full reverse engineering of something like that. So when we do this, we create that data module, for example, IT will do it in this particular enterprise-driven mode. We make that data module read-only, and it's controlled by IT. So for those of you who are concerned about, data governance and people creating data modules directly against data sources, and you have data joins and complicated data relationships that you don't want to go crazy, we could create the module for the users, make it read-only in a sense, and have it controlled by IT. Then end user models can link to this module or create data sets for their own modeling purposes, like what I'm showing over here. So you have users over here in the top who maybe will write reports or do self-service against this maybe better modeled data module, but it's IT controlled. They can't change it. The relationships and everything is controlled by IT. And they can also do a linked data module. And this is where I want to break out and show you a little bit of what that could potentially look like. So let's go over to our Cognos environment over here. I'm going to go to my content. I have some modules already created. Let's look at this one here. This is a starting point. This is, by the way, release 7. And what we have here in the data module editor is maybe the starting point of what IT will have. They usually kind of have to bring these tables in. This is your typical Go sales data source. And what IT will probably have to do is clean this up a bit to make it easier for end users to work with. And one thing we have here is like a detail header relationship over here. And we would maybe want to create similar to FM a merge query subject. So in this concept here, we have the creation of custom tables, which is a view. And we create this view, and this is called sales fact, for example. Finish that. Okay, so now I have the sales fact over here. This is where I want users to really work with. The relationships are already kind of embedded over here. That view is going to inherit that relationship that we have over here. And I don't want people to see the physical layer when people are writing reports off of this. So what we could do then is go ahead and just hide this from users. And in essence, I've created this namespace, and this is the presentation model namespace. Then what will happen is IT will continually model this more for end users, create other views, which, for example, this whole product line, this kind of third normal form product line relationship could be then denormalized into a product dimension. We'll add more tables. Here, IT will go in, or the central model will bring, for example, in the time dimension. And we'd have to create role-playing dimensions off of this in order to satisfy the relationship to where we have to slice and dice by ship date, order date, and things like that. So let me close this out and bring in something that is already kind of pre-done from a Prezo presentation model perspective in the interest of time. I'm going to go over here and I'm opening up this data module, which can be represented as the presentation by IT that is end users can look at. This is maintained by IT. Okay, so they've kind of built this out even more. Okay, we have now from a relations, let's look at the relationships perspective here. They've actually created a ship date dimension for you, the order date dimension, and the product dimension. And with data modules, we can see how those kind of are built out. So if we go to this custom tables tab, which I believe is now added in release 6 or 5, and we can actually see that these are views. And if we look at this, for example, ship date dimension, it's based off the time dimension table. The time dimension table is in the physical layer. And same thing with order date. And the product dimensions now is basically a view, or we'll stay with the concept of FM, a merged query subject across the 4. Okay. So now we've got this physical layer hidden. We've actually created this presentation layer nicely for you over here. Okay. So users can go ahead and create reports and things off of that. And it's controlled by IT in a central model. Now, what users can also do is we can create this linked data module off of this, because what we want to be able to do is add things to this in our own way. So I could actually go over here and say, create data module. And as you can see here now, this is my data module, but everything is kind of linked. This turns green, okay? I can still see these tables, but any changes that happen over here that IT makes will then flow its way over here into the linked module that I have. So I'm going to go over here and save this module. We're going to save it as into here, my area here for architectures here and temp. We're going to call this linked data module. Okay, now I have my linked data module over here in my temp folder. And I could actually create a report off of this. And when I look at it, as you can see, it looks just like that physical IT module over here. So if I create a report off of this, let's go ahead and create a report and list, and we'll go sales fact, and we'll go quantity, and we'll go product line, and write a report. Let's go ahead and run that. I basically have a report off my module that's been linked. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that report into linked report and say save. Okay. Now the question is, I've got now my link module and my link report. What if IT makes changes to that IT module? If I go over here into the Prezo area module, and IT decides to go ahead and rename this to maybe quantity, and they go ahead and want to add a new table, and they go over here and drag this table to make available for the Prezo layer. Let's drag it in there. Come on. There you go, branch. Okay. So then IT is going to go ahead and save that. Okay. Now I'm going to go over here and go to my temp area. I'm going to go to my linked report. Okay. And let's see if we run this report. It runs fine. You notice it doesn't change. Now we got a little bit of a caching issue here. Eventually that QTY label will change and reflect the name that was in that change. So if we look at the linked data module over here, you can see that it's inherited the QTY. And if I go over here, let's try that link report again. There, you see that QTY? That it inherited the change. It didn't break the report, it inherited the change, because this is really more of a label, and the actual ID of that field is actually stored in the report. So that's just really showing you a regression change that happened at the module level from IT, going up into the linked data module, and then into the report itself. And I can go in and go to my own linked data module and see what has been added. So if I go over here and go to my sources, so there's that branch table that was added by IT. And there's a new feature here that was in, I believe, release 7 actually, which shows you unused items. And it shows you, it highlights it for you. It says, oh, you have everything that the base IT model has except branch. So now I could bring that in and link to it as well and make my changes over here into this module. Okay. And save that. So let me go back to my presentation. So what I was trying to show there is that IT is basically the owner of this data module. Okay. And they can do all the changes over here. Users can write reports directly against this without worrying how to do all the joins and try to recreate the module from scratch. Okay, and maybe this is a representation of an FM model, a subject area of the FM model that used to be in an FM package that now has been made into a data module. And then users can also create their own data module that's linked to here. It'll still allow users to inherit changes here from this, and then add other things to this linked module, which kind of brings us to another area that we could look at. So this was kind of that IT-driven enterprise model. Let's look at another model that we could talk about. And I call this hybrid in a sense, because what we're doing over here is we want to leverage existing legacy IT maintained FM packages, this yellow box over here. So this tries to address the question of, I've got 100 FM packages over there that have been developed over time. They're still good. The relationships are still good. There's still good data in there from a metadata model perspective. Do I really have to reinvent the wheel on this thing? Part of this package can be integrated into a user or IT data module. We could leverage that. The legacy package here could also be used to create new data sets to be brought into a data module. And then we are allowed then to create these other data modules, which is a hybrid of basically modeling directly or leveraging FM packages that are IT maintained also, and also allows you to bring in your own uploaded spreadsheet files into this data module itself. So let's do a little quick demo on that. I'm going to go back here to my home. I'm going to go here and I'm going to open up this, what I'm calling my data module hybrid, which is basically the one that you talked about where it was kind of modeled by IT. But I have a scenario where I own this module, for example, but I want to actually bring in data from a package. So how would that work? One scenario is basically we're going to add a new source. We're going to go over here to the samples folder. Here we go, samples, and we're going to go over to models where we have our Go Sales Query package, the famous Go Sales Query package. So what it shows you now is basically kind of a reference pointer. It's green because you're linked. You're linked in this Go Sales Query. If you expand this, you could see the tables. And this expansion of seeing the tables in a package, I believe, is again, originally in 11.1, you couldn't really see this unless you actually try to link to it. I think it was 4 or 5. They went over here and allowed you to kind of expand the namespace folders and actually see the tables. But the question is, you don't really see those tables over here in the relationships view. But maybe in this particular use case, I don't need all this stuff, but I do need, for example, I need to have the retailers. I need this retailers table, for example. How would I represent that and bring that into the data module? Well, one method is to simply create, through custom tables, a link to that or a view to that. Okay, so what I would do is go to the top here and say create table. From that Go Sales Query package, find the table that I'm looking for. There it is, retailers, and say finish. What it does is it creates this view, and I need to rename that for clarity. Retailers. Now, if we just type in retailers, it'll bark at us a little bit and say, well, you already got a retailers table in there because it's already referenced in that package. So we can name it whatever we want. We could just call it retailer view or retailer. I just call it retailer and say, okay. Now I have a retailer view to the package, okay? And I'm gonna move the Go Sales Query package to the physical area so people don't see all that mess. Okay, and then if I do have the retailer name or code, I can create that relationship from here to, for example, the sales fact, and I could join the two together. So what's happening there? You got a hybrid environment there. You got tables joining across each other. So that's one way to do it. Okay. Let's go ahead and save that. And another way, which I think is kind of leading into data sets. Let me go ahead and save that. I will note that I see this issue sometimes where we say save and it doesn't say it's saved. I have to click around to save. And you might see that a little bit. So if you've been using this product a little bit, I've kind of noticed that. And I've seen that across different implementations. So I think it might depend on the version release, et cetera. Just a little side comment on that. So what I want to do is actually go back and actually create a data set. Okay, I want to create a data set and then bring that in. So if I go over here, let's go back to the package. Remember we went to this package over here called Go Sales Query. Now what I did was I brought the package in. I linked it into the module. But in a lead up to what we're talking about data sets, maybe it's a very small table. Okay, and what will be better potentially is creating a data set off this, because all I want to bring in this particular example is maybe the branch. Okay. So over here, I have my branch table, or actually let's say products. Now, well, products will leave that one. So branch table over here. So I just simply have to bring this branch table in, and I will make note that in this particular release, the data set, especially release 7, editor, the dataset tool has been significantly changed in that you can actually go in here and drop into the queries painter. So what that means before, the dataset editor only basically allowed you to drag in the tables or columns and add filters to that. Now I could actually basically create multiple queries. I could create joins and unions and things like that, and have very complex data set extraction rules, which I can now bring into my data modules. They basically took the query painter editor out of the reporting tool and dropped it into the data set editor, which is very powerful now. Before, we only had the ability to kind of go in here, drag things, create some filters and stuff like that. So this is very much improved. So basically what I'm doing here is I want to go ahead and create this data set. I'm going to say save and load data. And I'm going to go over to place it in that temp folder I had. This is called branch, for example. We're going to call it data set. Click save. See, it's loading over here. And another feature release of release 7 is that this loading time, and this is a very small data set, so it's not a perfect example, but the loading time of data sets, the creation of them, have been very much optimized. And I know from a real world scenario where maybe a data set took 3 minutes, now only takes a little over a minute. They've taken a lot of that technology and took it away maybe from the report service process and put it more to the query service. So you have a lot more bandwidth on that. So the creation of these data sets are much more quicker. So now that I've created that data set, I'm going to go over here to my content. Okay, I have the data set over here, and I want to add that in. So I'm going to go to my link data module over here. I'm sorry, I need to go to the one over here, the data module hybrid one. Okay, so here's our retailer that I got from Go Sales Query. I want to go ahead and add a data set in over here. Add use sources. I'm going to go to Architecture Webinar, temp. There's my branch data set and bring it in. Okay. So now I have my data set here. I have branch data set, and then I could actually connect that over here to my sales fact and those two together. Okay. So I'm going to go back to my diagram, my PowerPoint. So that allows us to leverage a couple of things here. So we've got a nice hybrid model where maybe this is my end user data model, or it could be a data model that was created by somebody else. And I pointed to an FM package. I brought that in. I used the same FM package to create a data set and brought that in as well, allowing end users to have much more self-service capabilities than they were used to before. Finally, end user driven is really people taking the modeling aspect of Cognos into their own hands for complete power and control. IT maintains the source databases or the data warehouses that are over here. Users will then utilize the Cognos self-service modeling components to model a database for their specific requirements. Now, there's a lot of people out there that I've worked with where maybe that's not necessary in ERP, but in large corporations, there are probably a lot of application databases out there that people in the business units are actually connecting directly and writing SQL queries against it because they know those tables really well. They know those tables better than IT. But because Cognos has to be modeled by IT, they don't want to go and get into a project with them. They just point directly to the databases themselves. Or they've taken Power BI and Tableau and pointed directly to the database themselves, okay? So this is a very well suited example for, point me to data, I'll take care of the rest because I know my data, okay? Then they can extract subsets of data from the source databases via the datasets technology that I was telling you about and integrate them into the data modules. And then users can then go ahead and upload their own privately maintained data in the form of spreadsheets into that data module. I will say that one of the use cases, offshoots of this from an end user perspective, is actually having data modules that completely consists of only uploaded Excel files, because there are a lot of use cases out there where end users, business units have created very complex processes that extract data into spreadsheets, and they have macros or other post-processing that create these beautiful Excel files with good data that's already been kind of prepped. And what they do with it is eventually use it in Excel to create graphs. Maybe they bring that into Tableau. Well, with this, we've seen use cases where these uploaded files, Excel files, can be the primary source of data in the data module, where we add even more cleansing to it. And then that data module then becomes a source of dashboards and reports, and very good useful information. Because the data warehouse maybe might not have that data. This is, again, a proprietary process that's in your organization that people have spent many years creating to produce these Excel files. Well, they can now just bring that in from an end user perspective into a data module and create dashboards themselves. So what I want to talk about real quick is the concept of data set libraries. Okay, so we did create some data sets here in the presentation, but we can start thinking of data sets in terms of a library perspective. Common data sets for use in user or IT-defined data modules. So there's a lot of data out there, typically subject-specific dimensions or referential data, or even summarized fact data that are in databases, but we could actually leverage the data set technology and create libraries, common data sets libraries stored in the team content store, okay? Again, it's not meant to storage large amounts of data. Typically, maybe a data set is good for like 10 to 15 million rows max, okay? But there could be different subsets of data that you can partition from different dimensions, slices of dimension, regional, that we could take out of the databases and store in a team content for better performance, because then these queries don't have to run against the databases every time. And this could really increase your performance on certain reports, makes your dashboards obviously run a lot quicker. And we could store them in common folder structures. So for example, over here in the home folder, I've created a concept of data set library. Okay, so we've got, this is the most simplistic one, but maybe in team content, we have different subject areas. We can create a dimensions folder, and this is where I have my branch data set, my facts, etc. So what we can do is just simply go, we could even use our Prezo module IT and create a data set off of this. And we could leverage maybe the product dimension and just drop the product dimension over here, say save and load data, and we want to put it in our data set library and dimensions, and we're going to call it the product dimension. Save. It's loading the data. Okay, and that could be a large table, so we have to do some analysis, analytics on our own. Okay. And over here in our data set library, now we have the dimensions, our product dimension, which we could then maybe just even take out the references for the product dimension in that data module I showed you and just use this. And then if we look at the properties of a data set, we create our schedules. We create our schedules and when it's going to get refreshed. Over here in the advanced area, we have things like the number of rows and time to refresh, etc. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to finish with that as part of the presentation. And again, the whole thought here is, I think a lot of people are really focused on what data modules are, what data modules do, all the different features of data modules, which we have covered in our webinars out there. We have webinars out there called Framework Manager versus data modules. We have relative time in data modules. We have a webinar for self-service, kind of touching on some of these concepts. But these are definitely not the only ones out there that you can use, but it's just really trying to spawn some thought to get away maybe from the weeds of what all the different things that data modules are, but to pull it back a little bit and really think about, if you're trying to get to self-service, how we could use these better technologies to use that, and not completely rely on trying to reverse engineer all your FM models and trying to create a better environment for self-service reporting for the end users, and giving more power or data democratization to your end users for self-service. Okay, I'll take it back to Mike.
Thanks, Pedro. And yeah, we got a lot of great questions, so stick around for the Q&A and get your questions in. If you're looking to make the shift to Cognos self-service, if you want to build that slide out, Pedro, whether it's the gamut from architectural changes all the way through to user adoption and training, we can help you. This is what we do every day. And you can get we provide a roadmap to self-service success and can help you develop that. You can contact us either via the chat or email us at info@senturus.com. A couple quick slides about Senturus before we get into the Q&A. We are the authority in business intelligence. We concentrate our expertise on business intelligence solely, with a depth of knowledge across the entire BI stack. We are known for providing clarity from the chaos of complex business requirements, disparate data sources, and constantly moving targets and changing regulatory environments. We've made a name for ourselves because of our strength bridging the gap between IT and business users. We deliver solutions that give you access to reliable, analysis-ready data across your organization, so you can quickly and easily get answers at the point of impact in the form of the decisions you make and the actions you take. Our consultants, like Pedro, are leading experts in the field of analytics with years of pragmatic real-world expertise and experience advancing the state of the art. We're so confident in our team and our methodology that we back our projects with a 100% money back guarantee that is unique in the industry. And we've been doing this for quite a while. We've been focused exclusively on business intelligence for over decades now. We work across the spectrum from Fortune 500 to mid-market, solving business problems across many industries, functional areas, including the Office of Finance, Sales and Marketing, Manufacturing, Operations, HR, and IT. Our team is both large enough to meet all of your business analytics needs, yet small enough to provide personalized attention. If you're interested in joining the Senturus team, we are hiring talented and experienced professionals. We're looking specifically for Cognos BI architect, project manager types, as well as senior Microsoft BI architects and senior Tableau report developers, as well as ETL developers. You can see the job descriptions at the link. Anyway, carrying on here, if you care to expand your knowledge, Pedro, you can go to the next slide. You can find more resources on the Senturus website at senturus.com/senturus-resources. Bookmark that because that's got all kinds of great information, including upcoming events like the two that I'll show you here. We've got the Secrets of High-Performing Report Development, and this is really technology agnostic. That's coming up in a couple of weeks at the usual time. Actually, I take that back. It's at an unusual time. It's at 1 p.m. Pacific time because our presenter is, I believe, from Australia. So if you're down under, you can join us on Friday at 8 a.m. And on March 11th, we're featuring Snowflake versus Synapse. So we'll be comparing Snowflake versus the Azure Synapse Analytics data clouds. And then check back soon because in April, at a time TBD, Pedro mentioned Cognos 11.2 coming out, and we will have a Cognos product manager going through the new features of that exciting and long-awaited release. Then just a couple more here before we get into Q&A. We offer, I'd be remiss if we didn't bring up our complete training capabilities across the three major platforms we support, Power BI, Tableau, and Cognos. We are ideal for organizations that run multiples of those platforms or are moving from one to the other. And we feature all of the modes of training, tailored group sessions, mentoring, instructor-led online, and self-paced e-learning, and can provide training in many modes and mix and match those to suit the needs of your particular user community. And finally, before we get to the Q&A here, again, last chance to get your questions into the question pane, and we'll jump to those real soon. We provide hundreds of free resources like this webinar and our blog, et cetera, on our website. We've been committed to sharing our BI expertise for over a decade at this point. And with that, we'll jump over to the Q&A. We have quite a few questions, Pedro. Let's see. There was a question about your thoughts on connecting, on dealing with multiple fact tables to the same dimension table, or having multiple dimension tables. So I think he's saying, let's say I have 5 fact tables and 3 dim tables. Yeah. 4 out of the 5 fact tables connect to 3 dim tables. So I think he's talking about, how would you handle more complex modeling scenarios, right, I guess. Right. Or would you?
Yeah. I think, short answer, definitely we can do that. Also, just on the side, IBM has come out with a new modeling guide, especially kind of focused a little on data modules itself, 11.1 data modeling guide, where it kind of talks about some of those questions. And in our other webinar, FM versus DM, I do talk about multi-fact tables. And one of the issues there is, of course, granularity. One might be at the day level, one might be at the month level. Well, there are new features in data modules, column dependencies they call them, which is basically determinants. And I think you might be trying to go into that area where you have determinants in FM. How do you do that in data modules? That particular feature has been ported to data modules. So multiple fact tables, multiple dimension tables, basically modeling a star schema is supported in data modules. So that can be done, definitely. I would, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I would say though that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Pedro, but in general, data modules are a market response to the Tableaus and the Power BIs, and typically those data sets tend to be, those models tend to be a little less complex and comprehensive. You're certainly not going to go and it's kind of a move away from the oftentimes very complex and comprehensive framework manager models into things that are more bite-sized or very use case specific.
Yeah, like I mentioned in the webinar, I personally wouldn't recommend taking an FM model that has been around for a long time with 500 tables and complex namespaces and joins, and really trying to mimic that whole thing into a data module. Like Mike was saying, it's kind of like think about what your subject area is, think about what your business use case is, and where you can actually leverage some components of that maybe and make it better in data modules, because you could add new features in data modules that don't exist in Framework Manager. For example, relative time, things that Transformer did very well. You can now integrate that into a data module and have year over year, year to date, month to date, with less complexity that Framework Manager never really supported well in natively, and they won't put that in there for sure. They won't put it in there. They put it in data modules, but you want to leverage that new technology. You want to leverage other things that are in there, data grouping, all these things that I talked about in the other webinar. But then you look at your source FM model that's very complex. Take a chunk of it, or take a subject area that some people would like to use, and look at it that way.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting, because Power BI provides some fairly robust transformation modeling capabilities, but Tableau only in the last, say, 6 months added relationships, where you could actually, instead of having to model all your data as a single flat table, even if you were combining multiple tables, you're now able to sort of model, have an abstraction layer there, which is really kind of interesting. So just to give you an idea of the differences there. This person was also asked, someone else was asking, when you're pointing to data, users in their environment can see framework manager models, but within modules, Cognos cannot see tables in the data warehouse. Is there something that they're missing there? And I think there's a setting, right, where you have to allow the exposure of those things to data module modeling, correct?
When you point a data module to an FM package, it's kind of like I showed you, the package kind of comes in, you can see the whole thing expand on the left, but you don't see it in the diagram. When the question about, I don't see all the database tables in the data warehouse, that could be more of a setting item, like you mentioned, where you basically want to create a data server connection to the data warehouse. And one of the aspects of that, they don't see that as part of the setting, you do have to refresh the metadata and pick the tables you want in that data server connection. And in order for the data modules to be able to see the tables in the data warehouse. So sometimes people will create the connection with a data server connection to the data warehouse. They don't do the next step to refresh the metadata to show it, and they don't see the tables.
Yep.
Okay.
That's what I've run into.
Yeah. So there's that last step that people forget about. So yeah.
Yeah, which is interesting that you'd have to do that manually, but yeah, it's kind of buried in there and you have to go find it, but refresh the metadata and hopefully you'll be able to see it then. There's a scenario here where this person is asking where the user is read-only access. What if they copy a data module to their My folders and make changes to the joins? Is there an ability to limit the copying or otherwise secure that?
Well, if the ultimately users can do whatever they want in the sense that they can break those links, and then they don't have any more links back to the read-only data module, right? And people can still copy. They can copy the source data module over there, but I'm trying to think it would only be read-only in a sense. But there's a lot of ways. It's not completely foolproof, because if they do have a connection back to the database, they could do that themselves too, you know. So I would say that people would just the read-only aspect of it kind of stays there. I have to double check whether if you actually copy it back to your My folders, whether that actually changes too.
Yeah, that's fine. There's a question about how many FM packages can be combined in a data module. Is that something? I know that's kind of an esoteric question.
Well, yeah, so you can continually keep adding a new FM package as a source. I've done 4 or 5. I'm sure you can keep doing it, right? But I think the key thing is how you kind of expose those packages in a very logical manner in the data module. So I showed you a concept where I added a package and I just created a view to that and put it in kind of like a presentation layer. So I don't think you want to just bring in packages and just expose the whole thing, because you basically have mimicked kind of the mess of the package. So yeah, you could bring them in, but I think there's some work that has to be done on the presentation layer to make it useful.
Exactly. That's the key point. Is it going to be usable?
Yeah.
When you're combining an FM package with a data module, does the FM package need to be built in DQM or can it be CQM?
I believe it has to be DQM. Yeah. CQM is really going away. I think everything around data modules is DQM. It has to be DQM. So I believe those FM packages have to be DQM.
Good to know. If you create a hybrid data module with query subjects that have object-based security, will that security be preserved?
Object-based security hybrid. So you're saying that whatever you bring on FM is gonna, if the user can't see that module based on security, yes, it should inherit that as well. So it will check that. It will inherit the FM properties of it, security properties of that. Yeah, because it's going to run through FM is what it's going to do. It's going to run through the package. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I figured. Makes sense. So with data set libraries, you know how you would save different data sets, say for different departments?
Yes.
The data set is saved under the same name, i.e. the security is based on department. Sorry, I'm kind of reading the question, if you understand.
So ultimately, data sets are basically files. They're files stored on Cognos. And if you don't want certain people to see certain data sets at the team content folder structure level, that's where you kind of maintain your security, right? So if I'm creating a regional product dimension and I create that in that particular region's folder, data set library for that region, you'd put the security there so that they can't see it, from an object-based perspective. Yeah. So it's all really around team content folder.
Got it. Do we know if data modules are supported using Cafe?
I haven't tried that. No, I don't know. Cafe, yeah, interesting. Yeah.
There's a question about what kind of RAM hit does the server take when using data sets. I imagine that has a lot to do with the size of the data set.
Yes, it does. So the way data sets work, it's round robin in the sense that the first person who hits the data set, it's kind of hitting the file, but then that data set gets thrown into memory. And it stays in memory until the memory is full and another data set comes in and it has to use the space. It will depend on the size, right? There are server settings which allow you have to do it in the admin console. I think the default is 8 gigs or maybe 4 gigs. But then you can increase, say you have a large server with a lot of memory, you can increase the amount of memory that's used for data sets in the admin settings. I don't have the setting off the top of my head, but you can control that and allow more memory in your servers for data sets.
Good to know. We have a client here, an attendee, saying that they've been using data models where they combine various sources to create data modules and then creating data sets out of those to improve performance.
Yes.
And then bringing that back into the data module.
Yes.
That's great. From a self-service perspective, I imagine they've been seeing issues when trying to combine package and other data sets into data modules. Are there shortcomings that you're aware of about using packages and data modules?
So the pack, like I showed you before, I've actually joined across. I might have a date dimension or some dimension that's in the package going to a different database, and I've joined it to a data set that's in my data module. I'm sure there are probably some scenarios out there. There might be some issues, but from what I've seen so far and used, I have not seen too many. I mean, if you've got a very big table that you're linked to a package and you're limited by the performance of that database, you're still going basically through FM packages to the query service back to the database and then waiting for the data to come back in and then joining that maybe to a data set in Cognos that's in the module. So your lowest the common denominator is that connection back to the database.
Sure.
Adding to the comment what the person made about data set libraries, creating a data. This is where you had to create a data module to create a data set library to bring the data set back into this convoluted, because you've created some relationships in the module in order to create the data set you want, and then putting that data set back into the same data module. I believe that particular issue will be cured now with the new release 7 data set editor. I showed it a little bit, but because you can now control the queries of the creation of the data set, you can go back to the package, like I said, you can create your unions, your joins, your filters, complex filtering, which maybe that's what you're doing and using the data module for. I even had to use what I call staging data modules to create the data sets that I really want. That's now buried in it's now embedded into the data set editor, which makes it a lot more easier to use and a lot less headache. So that whole staging data module intermediate step can now be potentially replaced by the dataset editor completely.
Interesting. Yeah, and looping back to Cafe really quick, that's been deprecated, is obsolete now, and it's only included in planning analytics, and it's called Planning Analytics for Excel, or PAX. So just so you're aware of that. Now, it is past the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful to everybody here, and there are a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, so we will complete a response document and post that to our website. It'll be right there along with the recording, which will show up in a few weeks, and the deck that's already up there now. We thank you all for your time today. Pedro, thank you for another excellent presentation. And if you want to go to the last slide there, Pedro, please do reach out to us if you have any analytics needs. If you still use a phone, we got a 888 number. Go to our website, or you can always email us at info@senturus.com. So thank you very much for your time today, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you on a future Senturus event. Thanks a lot. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.